What's going on, homies? So today I just want to make a quick video going over the phenomenon of everybody's favorite, anxiety. Whew, okay, so when we talk about anxiety, right, like it's basically a discussion about an overall feeling of discomfort, when we're feeling we're feeling on unease, like when we're feeling on edge. Maybe there's like a little bit of paranoia or just like uneasy anticipation of a certain event, and to me, at its core, I feel like anxiety is ultimately about fear, and what happens with anxiety, and I feel like what makes it so treacherous, to use a dramatic word, right? I think what makes it so like treacherous or dangerous is that you can become afraid of being afraid. And I think that's what makes anxiety so bad and kind of gets you stuck into like this loop and everything, right? Is not only does anxiety make you afraid of certain things like going out in the public or going places that you used to enjoy, maybe talking to new people or like being in groups and things like that. But it also puts you into the state of anticipation, right? Where as even when you're not in the situation, you're worried about what's going to come up next. And then that makes you anxious, which then puts you in that feedback loop, right? Of like, you worry about what's going to happen. Therefore, you're anxious. Therefore, you avoid the thing. And when you avoid the thing, the fear gets worse, because when you avoid something, like what you do, right, is that you tell your brain and your body, you tell yourself that this thing is so above me, that it's such a magnitude greater than like anything that I can handle, that the only way that I can do something about this is to escape it. And so you put that thought and that feeling in your mind, and what ends up happening, right, is that like you think that way, therefore you avoid it. And then when you avoid it, you build it up more in your head. And not only that, but then there can be a sense of like guilt or just like anger at yourself, because you're like, oh, like I needed to do this. Like, why can't I move past this? Why am I like this? So then you become angry at yourself and upset, which then lowers your mood, which puts you back into feeling crappy. And that crappiness ends up coming back around into like this nice little circle, right? Where you have the event that takes place. Your response to the event is to avoid it. And then when you avoid it, you become more afraid of it. So then when the event comes back around again, you're anticipating the fear already, right? So the event hasn't even occurred. Like now you're just waiting in anticipation about what's going to happen, and you're freaked out. And there we have our good old friend anxiety, right? Like clinical anxiety anyway. Because there's a difference between being anxious and having a anxiety disorder, like when anxiety's, I think, a relatively normal part of life and something that we all feel. I know that in certain Eastern philosophies, it talks about the removal of anxiety, like when one is fully in control and like able to regulate their emotions, like anxiety doesn't become a factor because fear is no longer a factor. So I don't want to speak on everybody's experience and say that like anxiety isn't a thing, but like for normal people, right? For people that haven't quite opened that third eye up, right? Who haven't become enlightened and have gotten to that point, anxiety is a regular part of life, and I think the thing to remember is that like we don't have to become incapacitated by it, like it's okay to be uncomfortable with something, and it's okay to be freaked out about something. You're right. It's the choice that we make when we encounter that fear that makes all the difference, and that kind of decides where we're going to go, because to kind of get into the meat of discussion, man, like I think the two biggest reactions that we see, right, when we encounter anxiety or people that are battling anxiety, and like what kind of holds them back, is that they either want to avoid the thing that has them upset, like they try to like stay away from certain places, stay away from certain people, they isolate themselves, they kind of close themselves off and like retreat inward. And The other thing we do is fight it, you know, like we try to confront it with force, where we try to like go into our thoughts and tell ourselves like, no, you don't think that. Only weak people think like that. This is what we're going to do. And you can like physically try to brute force the anxiety. And I don't think either of those works, you know. What happens when we try to avoid anxiety is that it chases us, you know, and anybody who's tried that strategy knows that like there's always this lingering sort of like fear, or just like this bad feeling, and just like something that's eating you up, and you're just like always on edge, and that doesn't feel good, right? And then when you try to fight it, you end up getting into this bickering mode with yourself, where you try to like brute force it, but then that makes the thoughts even stronger sometimes, which means like you're going to fight even harder, and it puts you into this like just exhausting state of constantly trying to beat yourself up. So with that being said, like, what do you do then, right? If you can't run away from it, and fighting it doesn't work, like how the heck do you win? And like, this is where like what I've been seeing, man, from my reading and just like my own looking into it from both like a scientific and like a spiritual perspective, from the people and resources that I've seen, man, it's about acceptance. You know, it's accepting the fact that you feel this way, like accepting the fact that these uneasy feelings are there, accepting the fact that you don't always feel good, accepting the fact that you have these like weak moments and like how it's making you feel, and you acknowledge it and you learn to sit with it, you know. And I think that's hard for us to do, because our first instinct a lot of the times when we're undergoing something that's like hard or difficult is we don't want to sit with it. We want to fix it. You know, like we want to do something about it. We want to repair it. We want to make it so it's not that way. And as time goes on, right, like we've learned that some things you can't fight, you know, like some battles can't be brute forced. And I think anxiety is one of those, where I think the first thing that to get it under control, and the first thing that happens that helps us move through it, is acceptance of how we feel and learning to sit with those feelings a little bit, you know. And then once you have acknowledged how you're feeling, what's making you feel that way, where this thought and this feeling's coming from, and really allow yourself to feel it, then you say, okay, I acknowledge this, I feel this, I don't necessarily like it, but it's okay for me to feel this way. And then you find ways to move on with your day. You know, like you find an activity to engage in, like you talk to a person, you go to that store, you do that thing, and you don't let it take over your life, you know. And this becomes the difficulty of moving past anxiety, right? Is that I think the only way past it is through it. Like you can't avoid it, and like squaring up with it, like in that sense, isn't necessarily going to be helpful. Like you have to square up with it, but you do it with comfort and acceptance, you know. Like it's not a fight, it's an embrace, you know. You embrace it rather than like trying to go into attack mode. So that was just a thought I had in regards to that, man. It's something that just from like my own experience and just reading and just that sort of thing that I've seen when it comes to this subject. And I know it's something that a lot of people are suffering with. So I appreciate you listening, man. I hope that anybody that's suffering through this or dealing with it can get the help they need. Like sometimes it's really helpful to talk to a therapist or go to somebody that's a professional to kind of help you find ways to work through it. But I think that learning to confront ourselves, but doing it in a kind and accepting way, is the beginning steps on making it past some of these demons, you know. So that being said, be good out there, guys. Always good talking to you, and I'll see you in the next video.